Welcome to Mindfulness Unscripted. I'm Jon Orsini. Take a big breath in. Here we go. I used to study Aikido for a little while. It's this Japanese martial art, really beautiful, very flowing. And there was a saying on the door. And this was a long time ago, but I remember the saying was something to the effect of, when we penetrate one thing deeply enough, we reveal the entire universe. So this has a lot of implications in a lot of ways, on a lot of levels. It reminds me of John Muir, the way that he observed nature, for instance. As you start pulling a thread, if you look at, oh, what's this bee doing? And then the bees do this, and this does this, and this does this. You start to pull the thread and everything's connected. There's John Muir has beautiful quotes about that. There's all kinds of versions of this existing regarding nature. And specifically, I'm sharing this here because of this experience I had. Now jump 2 years later, at the tender young age of 40, I started doing jujitsu. And so another martial art, which is not intentional, that it actually revealed this lesson again in a really interesting way. So revealing the entire universe, not in the sense of nature in this case, but in the sense of how our nervous system interacts in relationship. So in the breathwork that I guide, especially these somatic breathwork journeys, these deep dive journeys, I often frame, there's a lot of ways to conceptualize the layers upon which this process, this practice is operating to help us heal, grow, and transform in so many different ways. And one of the primary functions is that breathwork at its core is such an effective way to work with the nervous system. It can move us from a state of surviving to a state of thriving. So in a broad sense, if we are living mostly day to day in this hyper sensitized survival state where it's just, we're just trying to stay alive. So we might be hyper vigilant. Things that are not a threat might feel like a threat because they resemble something in some form or fashion from our past, and our nervous system's job is to protect us and keep us alive. So one way of saying this is, if you imagine God, I don't even like saying this, but if you imagine like a traumatized dog that's been getting hit, say they have this, chance for a beautiful owner that's going to look after them, like a rescue dog that's been adopted by a new family. And so if that dog is used to getting hit, then the new owner gently reaches out their hand, and the dog might recoil because to them, a hand coming out means violence, right? So the dog is in this survival mode, and the dog can, and with a beautiful family and, someone who takes them in and takes care of them and really sweet, with time, with patience, with care, that dog can move from a state of surviving to a state of thriving. And it's how the nervous system interprets the world around us, right? If everything feels like a threat when it isn't, we're kind of, you could say, stuck in that sort of survival mode. So this can happen and does happen to humans for a lot of different reasons, but I'll just speak to the concept of relationship. Right? So if we're used to getting hurt in relationship in some form or fashion, even if we get into new relationship, we're going to see little cues that might remind us of past relationship, even if, they might look similar on the surface, but are like the hand coming out to the dog, but in essence are actually completely different at their core. And so if we continue to live in survival mode, we'll miss the opportunities to thrive. And so the body being in survival mode is completely understandable, but here's how we shift to thriving. And this is what I'm getting at. In my jiu-jitsu training just this morning, they call it rolling. I was sparring with a guy who's been there a couple years. He's a lot better than me, right? Like, part of what's so powerful about things like this is they're very humbling. So I was sparring with this guy, and super friendly, but he was, I was in survival mode. Like, I was just trying to survive. I was just trying to not get submitted, like put into some sort of very uncomfortable situation where I had to tap out or, say, mercy, I give up, right? And so I'm proud to say I did not. I lasted, but I only lasted by being in pure survival mode. So I thought about how there will come a day, if I stay with this process and I keep showing up day after day, learn the techniques, learn how to assess situations, learn how to capitalize, like in moments when when the opponent is tired or like whatever it is, when I learn how to assess this relationship and deepen my skill set, little by little, I will be able to move from a state of pure survival to a state of thriving. Like after putting enough of time in, there may come a day where he puts a move on me, and instead of just trying to avoid it or trying to get out of it, there may come a day where he goes to put a move on me, and I actually now can see an opening, a glimmer of an opening, and I can maybe reverse the move, even if it's just a moment, and then he might get me back again, right? But it happens in these little steps by continually showing up to the practice. So a lot of times in mindfulness or all kinds of experiences, I know I myself, there's this idea of just being enlightened in some sort of peak experience moment. Like, oh, maybe it's this, this journey or this trip or this, whatever the thing may be, this modality, this or this, maybe this will be the big peak experience that gives me this flash of enlightenment, and then I'll get there. I'll figure it out, that whatever there is or whatever that is, right? And this opens up this bigger conversation about what even enlightenment is or what that might even mean. Suffice it to say, and I could save that for another time, potentially, I don't know that there's really thinking of healing in terms of, or growing or transformation, thinking of it in terms as if there's an end point. Like removing the idea you're broken, so if only you do just the right thing or have this peak experience of just the right thing, then you'll be fixed, right? I don't believe that you, me, anybody else, we're not broken. Our nervous system responds to pressures, but our nervous system's job is to keep us alive. So whatever's going on is on some level, in some degree, a response to try to keep us alive, even if it's difficult. If we can try to meet ourselves with compassion around whatever's going on, this is a response to try to keep me alive. Okay, how can I, piece by piece now, move from this state of survival to this state of thriving in this fundamental sense? And it comes from just these little pieces of showing up. This is really why I'm sharing all this, and what I'm getting at is that to bring it all the way back to the beginning, if you penetrate one thing deeply enough, it reveals the whole universe. By committing to this particular martial art, I had this flash of inspiration today to say, oh, in this context, in this moment, in this sparring session, I am in a pure state of survival. But by continuing to show up for my practice, piece by piece, I will step by step by step by step start to shift into a state of thriving, piece by piece, by continuing to show up in my practice. So it's not about looking for these peak experience moments, like what's the thing that's going to get me across the finish line. There isn't a finish line. One of my teachers would say, he's like, you're a verb. We are a verb. We are constantly in motion. And so there's no fixed point, right? Keep showing up to our practice, and we'll keep finding spaces and ways in our life that we move from a state of survival to a state of thriving, little bits at a time. Sometimes those steps might seem so small that we don't even realize them when they're happening. And this is why taking time for self-reflection, this is why gratitude, and I don't mean in like some spiritual bypassing, trying to make yourself feel grateful when you don't, but I mean objectively assessing our day, like before you fall asleep at night or whatever it might be, objectively assessing moments that you have in relationship. The last thing I want to say here, again, regarding relationship, is that we definitely can and do get hurt in relationship. We also heal in relationship. So I'll give one more kind of parallel here. Maybe in a difficult relationship, you were nitpicked a lot, for instance, or I'll just use like maybe there was a relationship that I was in and I was nitpicked a lot, and eventually that relationship just couldn't sustain, and so we went separate ways, right? And this could be a work relationship, this could be a partnership of any kind, right? So in some sort of relationship, I was nitpicked a lot. It made me feel really small. I just was becoming a shell of myself. And I started to live from a place of just survival mode, where anytime I heard something that felt like a criticism, I was just very, you could say reactive to, not necessarily outwardly, but maybe would go into a state of freeze or fawn, these survival states. That relationship goes separate ways, whatever, end up in a new relationship. And say, for instance, I don't know, there's a dish in the sink and someone's like, oh, can you put the dish in the dishwasher? And the survival reaction might be like, ooh, this reminds me of getting nitpicked, when really it's just an innocent like request or like something really light. And so an example, this is the last thing I want to say here. An example of these small steps by just showing up get especially revealed in relationship. So we get hurt in relationship. We also heal in relationship in these moments that we repattern. So just like in jiu-jitsu, by showing up to practice, you'll notice the small moments. Oh, I used to just get dominated there, but now I see this small window where I can do this little move, and now I can reverse it. And that little thing is like a repatterning moment. And so you still might get thrown around later, but like that moment you shifted. So in the same way in a relationship, in a new relationship, maybe this person has a request. It reminds you, your system, of, oh, am I about to get nitpicked? So maybe you freeze up, you tighten up, or you say, like, I got to get out of here, or whatever in your system reacts that way. But you take a breath, right? Create some space. This is why I love the breath so much. It's always there for you, and the feeling of your breath will always bring you home. And it could be a great way to give yourself that little bit of space to move from reactivity to responsiveness. So in this new relationship, I'll have a session coming up. In this new relationship, instead of being hyper vigilant in a way you used to have to be in the old relationship, in this moment of feeling the tightness creep in, oh, am I about to get super nitpicked? You take a breath and you notice, I'm not. And in that very moment, you move from surviving to saying something like, sure, honey, sweetheart, like whatever, like, sure, yeah, I'll put that dish in the dishwasher. And then the partner's like, you're the sweetest, I love you so much, right? Just example here, like broad example. And in that seemingly small moment, you've repatterned your system to foundationally, it's another step on the process to move from surviving to thriving. So appreciate the small moments, look for the small moments, and those small moments start to accumulate, and it all starts with practice. Even something like, to bring it all home, even something like committing to a practice of a martial art, committing to your yoga practice on the mat, committing to your, of course, meditation, breathwork, whatever the practice that is supportive and life affirming, if you keep going deeply enough with any one thing, you will reveal the entire universe, as the Buddhist texts say. New episode every Wednesday. JonOrsini.com for upcoming events and more. Victory to the light within.